The latest tally by the United Nations shows some 110 million people are now displaced around the globe, and this figure is reportedly the greatest number of refugees since the Second World War. So what's fueling this alarming surge? What is the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees in Korea doing to address this reality? And what can individuals do to ease the plight of displaced people? Welcome to Issues and Insiders. Today I have the pleasure of speaking with the representative of the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees here in Korea. I have Ms. Jun Hai Kyung with us. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation.
Right. Well, 6 months ago, I understand, you became the first South Korean to be tapped as the head of the UNHCR representative to the country, that is, of course. What were your thoughts at the time, and what activities have you been involved in since then?
Okay. When I heard the news, I felt a lot of responsibility, because it's not a normal practice to have a national representing the organization in his or her own country, right? So I felt that it's a lot of trust of the organizations towards the Republic of Korea, and at the same time a lot of trust on myself, so that I would be a good bridge between the organization and Korea. So lots of responsibility, that's how I felt. And since then I've been learning about rediscovering my own country, because I've been away for so long. Learning about the asylum system and the refugee situation in the country, but at the same time learning about UNHCR global operation, because when you are serving in one particular country, you focus on that country. But in Korea, in addition to what we do inside Korea, in the Republic of Korea, we also fundraise and advocate for the situation around the globe. So I also need to be fully informed about the situation globally. Yeah.
Right. I understand the UNHCR here in Korea is currently hosting a film festival that ends today, that is Friday, and this seeks to share the lives of displaced people worldwide. Could you tell us a bit about the background behind this film festival?
Yes, I mean, this is the second online festival. We initiated the film festival itself since last year, but since 2017 we have been producing films based on the travels that our Goodwill Ambassador, Mr. Chung Woo-sung, you may know, has been doing, but also about identity and refugee issues, right? So we think that art is a very useful medium to express complex ideas, right? So we thought that films are a very good way to, communicate the situation of those who have forcibly left their homes. Yeah.
In an annual report released last week, the UN Refugee Agency revealed that a record, and I quote, 110 million people worldwide had been displaced. Could you explain this very grim finding for us?
Yes, actually, it's a little bit, as an agency that we deal with forcibly displaced people. I mean, our ideal world is a world where we would not be needed anymore. Unfortunately, every year we are seeing these record numbers. And of course, I mean, in 2022, already 108.4 million we were estimating. And then as of May this year already, we are over 110 million globally, right? So it's, of course, we have had the situation in Europe, Ukraine. Some countries have revised the way they estimate the figures, so that has also prompted. But also we have conflict situations internally, so we have an increase in the number of people who fled their home inside their country, what we call the internally displaced people, right? So all in all, it looks quite challenging. Yeah.
Right, it really does. And you spoke about the war in Ukraine. That being said, Seoul's Justice Ministry says that Russians accounted for the highest number of those applying for asylum here in South Korea as of during the first quarter, that is, of this particular year. Do you foresee a greater rise in this number moving forward?
We are aware of the increase in the number of this particular group, but as I said before, I mean, since the number of forcefully displaced is increasing around the world, I mean, it's unfortunately very natural that the number of asylum seekers reaching to Korea will continue to grow.
Right. Korea was the first Asian country to enact a separate, an independent refugee law some decade ago, I believe. And its refugee approval rate, however, is not as impressive. Could you explain this for us?
Well, that's more for the government to explain. Having said that, I think, of course, the percentage of refugee recognition rate is not an impressive figure, as you said, perhaps. At the same time, it's not the only criteria to see how the system works, right? So, as you rightly said, Korea has 10 years of implementation of the Refugee Act. We think that is a very good timing at this stage to look into what has worked, what has not worked, and see how the adjustment can be made. And that's also something that other countries have done, because no system is perfect, right? And the situation changes. So recently we held the first protection dialogue, what we call protection dialogue, to look into what are the areas that maybe the Republic of Korea may consider looking into more deeply. And then we are also hoping that the government would embark into a quality initiative like other Europeans have made, to look into holistically how the system works and what are the areas where they need to strengthen.
Right. And staying with that, there have been proposals here for a revision in the country's Refugee Act to perhaps toughen reapplication procedures for those who've been rejected. What are your thoughts on this?
We have already shared with those concerned our opinion on that, and of course, when a government looks into adjusting their legal framework, it's very important that safeguards are put in place so that, you know, because the number of asylum seekers have increased, obviously, the immediate reaction is not to limit reapplications, and maybe this is a very simple way of expressing what is happening. But how we felt is that there should be safeguards, right? And in that, the government, and that's why we have been recommending to look into how the refugee status determination system works, the human and financial resources that they need, language, for instance, cultural differences, gender differences, the interview skills. It's all comes together, right? So you rightly said that the Refugee Act. It's 10 years old. It's in its teenage period, so there are growing pains. But we think that the most important part is the willingness and the efforts made to make the system adjust to the reality.
Right, and there is, of course, room for improvement there.
Absolutely, and we are, of course, ready to support and the government and also, yeah.
Right, and against that backdrop, there are some pundits who claim that an open immigration policy could perhaps serve to tackle Korea's shrinking population. What do you advise to ensure a productive policy, so to speak?
Well, obviously, immigration is very much linked to the refugee policies as well. And then in the case of Korea, of course, the aging society and all that is a very important issue at the moment. Looking at the future of the Republic of Korea, it's very important, right? I think the most important part is to look at, as I said, the refugee system, but also entirely, because everything is linked, right? So when looking into the immigration policy, or like the government is looking into the creation of an immigration service or agency, we are also hopeful that in that process, because everything is linked, that the refugee-related policy is also looked into. Yeah.
Right. Regardless of these efforts, the sad reality is that displaced individuals across the world face public prejudice wherever they are, wherever they go, that is, if it's not their home country. What do you have to say about this rather unfortunate reality?
Yes, I mean, I think it's, well, in a way natural for people to be a little bit reserved about what is foreign, right? But I think it's very important that because we are so exposed to so much information, so in the case of Korea, for anybody to anybody who has an idea of how a refugee is, it's very unlikely that the person has met a refugee in their own dealings, right, or a daily life, right? Because the number of refugees is quite small in Korea compared to the population. So I think it's very important that all of us, when we are exposed to so much information, we check the facts first, right? I think it's very important. Like, for instance, some people may have the misperception that if we have all these refugees, asylum seekers, foreigners, migrants, the crime rate would go up. But actually, if you compare the crime actual fact, you know, that is not the case, right? So I think it's very important not to be misguided by emotional, perhaps, information, but we check the fact. Yeah.
Right, of course, to look at the facts. This is an impromptu question, but earlier on you mentioned that before taking up your post here in the country, you were abroad, away from home for quite a long time. If I'm not mistaken, I believe you were in Myanmar before being here in Korea. Could you tell us a bit about your experience there?
I think it was, I learned a lot in Myanmar. I mean, it's been a country where UNHCR and, you know, others, we have worked quite a lot. We of course have the situation of the Rohingya who have crossed the border mainly to Bangladesh, but in other countries in the region. But also there have been some incidents, right, that has led to massive internal displaced movement within the country. So it's been quite a learning experience, and I have in my heart the people in Myanmar, and it's the kind of people that you would like to serve more. Because, for instance, when UNHCR in cases of emergency, because people just flee and they don't take anything with them, so we do have like our emergency court relief package. So and you have there, like, it could be tents, kitchen utensils, blankets, clothing, everything, and then people who have gone, days, 10 days, 20 days walking to come to us, they would say, oh, I don't need the blanket, please give it to those who need it more, right? So when you see and hear these things from people that you think that you are assisting, but actually they are showing you how humanity it is, right? It was a very good experience for me. Yeah.
Right, I see. That being said, what can we, myself included, of course, as individuals, do to perhaps ease the plight of such people?
Yeah, I think the most important point is to be interested. I think to be interested and follow the situations, because some topics are very high interest because it's very often on the news, but after a while it fades a little bit. So I think the work of the media is very important, because if going back to the numbers that we talked, unfortunately there are the number of conflicts around the globe is faster to grow than to close, right? So in that sense, I think it's very important for all of us to be curious and be interested. For those who are interested in UNHCR's work, I mean, you can check our website, and for those of watching us from Korea can go to our website and also the global website. But I think the most important part would be the interest. And also in Korea and all over the world, we do have like events, and like for instance, on the World Refugee Day on the 20th of June, we have had a talk concert with the youth, with our Goodwill Ambassador. We have this film festival. So there are many things that you can do to also get more information. And then, of course, individuals can also donate their time, but also financially to UNHCR, again in Korea, but also globally. Yeah.
Right, and members of the media like myself can continue to raise awareness about the situation.
Absolutely, that helps a lot.
Right, good to know, good to know. Could you tell us a bit more about the future agenda, that is, of the UNHCR here in Korea?
Yes, I mean, I think we will continue to work because we do have two functions, as I said at the beginning. The one is inside Korea to raise the advocacy and to provide support to the authorities so that Korea could adjust and grow its asylum system in line with the international standards, right? So that's our mission in country. And then Korea is a rich country now. And Korea has been and is able to do more for the situation globally. So we are also hoping to increase the financial contribution from the government and the people of Korea. So we will be working a lot, and we are hopeful that the public is interested in the situation of those who had no choice but to leave their homes. Because the people we are talking about today is not people who were sightseeing or tourism or moving around because they want their kids to go to better schools. But we are talking about people who had no choice but to leave the country, right, and seek protection elsewhere. So we are hopeful that in the Republic of Korea, the people will have more understanding, sympathy towards what Korea went through not long ago.
Right, during the Korean War, of course, and after as well.
Absolutely.
We have like about a minute left before we end today's session. I was wondering, before you leave us, could you tell us a bit, very briefly, about how you started your work with the interests of refugees at heart?
Well, I think my personal background also influenced. I grew up in Argentina, and then, of course, I did my university studies here, and then I studied elsewhere. But I think growing as a minority, and then getting to understand that people have different ideas and people see things differently, and there's no like absolute yes or not, but there are people under different circumstances living outside what is their own country, right? But that country can be your own when the people welcome you, right? So I think from that interest, and of course my parents are from the northern part of the peninsula, so you do have this eagerness, longingness to return to the gohyang, as we call the hometown, right? So it's quite touching, because everywhere where I met refugees and displaced people, everybody told me they want to go home. So if you find a refugee or asylum seeker elsewhere in the world, all of them, they want to go home. So it's not that they are taking up your space. They are there because they had no choice. So I am hopeful that through my own work, but with everybody's heart, right? Welcoming heart. Those who had to leave their hometown can be welcome here in Korea or elsewhere. Yeah.
Thank you so much for your thought-provoking words, and best of luck in your future, in your post right now as the head of the UNHCR here in Korea.
Thank you very much.
Right, well, that is all the time we have for this week's editions of Issues and Insiders. Thank you for watching. Have a good weekend.